Hey y'all, it's time for another tutorial. It is November already, if you can believe that. But this tutorial is for our monthly subscription kit. This month is Thanksgiving themed, of course. It's a really simple kit to paint and put together, but I am going to show you some of the techniques that I use. The first one here is, of course, the traditional makeup sponge method. So this method is kind of back to the basics for those of you who are new, or for those who have been around for a while but haven't tried the makeup sponge method. I like the makeup sponges from Artist Choice. I get those off of Amazon, or I've also used the ones from Walmart, the Equate brand. Those are pretty good too. I don't like the ones from Dollar Tree. Those ones are super soft and squishy. They soak up way too much paint. So if you're going to use the makeup sponge method, make sure your makeup sponges are nice and firm. When you dip your sponge into the paint, just dab off the excess off to the side a little bit. You don't want to have too much paint on your sponge. And then just dab it onto your project. If you're doing the lighter colors like white or yellow, you're going to want to do multiple coats. Even some of the darker colors, depending on the type of paint you're using, you may want to do more than one coat. With the paints that I send out, one coat is usually enough for most colors. White, I always do 2, sometimes 3 coats, and that's pretty standard. For this project, I use the makeup sponge for everything. One technique that you can use that I think would look really nice on this project is the baby wipe method. For those who are not familiar with it, all you do is you take a baby wipe or a damp paper towel, you dip that in your paint, and you wipe it onto your project. That will create a more of a stained look. It allows for a nice thin coat, and it allows for some of the texture from the wood material to show through, which makes it look really nice. For this project though, I just used the sponge. Then we'll move that off to the side to let it dry, and we'll start on the next piece. One thing I always tell you guys, don't feel like you have to use the same colors that I do. These are just colors that I chose that match my decor. Feel free to make it your own and get creative. That's part of the fun. And then of course I'll go in for coat number 2. And then just continue painting your pieces the way that you want. Now for this next piece, you're going to want to grab a baby wipe or a wet paper towel, and you're going to want to wipe off the smoke residue from when the laser engraved those words. If you don't do this, sometimes that residue, especially if you're going to be painting with white or a lighter color, that residue will soak through the paint and it'll create kind of a shadowed look underneath your words, which if you like the rustic look, that might be okay for you. I was kind of going for something a little bit more clean with this project, so wiping off the residue will allow the paint to be nice and crisp. And then just let that piece dry a little bit before you paint it. Now when you're painting over a piece that has engraved words or those shiplap lines, one of the tricks that you can use to make sure you don't get any paint down into the engrave is to use the makeup sponge method. Make sure you dab off as much of the excess paint as you possibly can. If you have a lot of paint on there, when you press that sponge down, it's going to soak into the words and it's going to be hard to read. So you want to use a very, very little paint, and you want to go over it very, very lightly. You don't want to push down real hard with your sponge. Just dab nice and light around there, just so you're painting the very top of the project. For this, you're definitely going to want to do more than one coat. I usually do maybe 3 coats when I'm using the white on an engraved project, just because I want to go over it super, super lightly. And then next you're going to want to glue all your pieces together. I use a super glue. You don't have to. You can use just about any glue you want. I like the super glue just because it dries really fast, and I am a very impatient person. But if you're working with kids, of course you're going to want to use something that's a little bit more forgiving. One of the tips that I have for if you are using super glue is to keep a scrap piece of paper handy next to you. And when you put your super glue on your project, if you accidentally get a little bit too much, you can always dab the excess off onto the scrap piece of paper before putting it on your project. Sometimes what happens is if you put too much super glue on the back and then you go to put it down onto your project, it'll like ooze out the sides. So this is a way to get a nice clean looking project. And then once everything's dry, we're going to want to create our little bow for our cutting board. First, you're going to want to cut a piece of twine, probably about 6 to 8 inches long, and that's going to hold your bow together in the middle. Make sure your ribbon is facing the right direction. Cross the ends over in the front, and then bring the middle in and pinch it. This is going to create the bow. I always try to test it, make sure it looks good. I like the sizing, the way it looks on the project, and then you're going to tie the middle. To tie it, I leave a little bit of room on one side, wrap the twine around maybe 3 or 4 times, and then tie it to itself in the back. And then cut off the excess, and then it's ready to glue onto your project. If you want, you can dovetail your ends. I did, but that's more of a personal preference. I think it looks good either way. Then you can hot glue your bow onto your piece, and that one will be ready to go. Next, we'll work on adding the fringe to your little tag. Now you can do the fringe, or you can add beads or another bow if you want. It's totally up to you. But for this project, I did do fringe. You're going to want to cut off a piece, probably about another 6 inches or so, to tie it up at the end, and then take whatever's left and I use 3 fingers and then just wrap it around, or 4 fingers, and just wrap it around as many times as you can. And then just cut one end so you have a bunch of pieces, and I trimmed it up a little bit and took out that tiny piece, and then just poke them all through your hole. Make sure they're about even, and then you can wrap your twine around it again 3 or 4 times, and then tie it to itself in the back, and that's it. And just a side note, because it popped into my head, I usually don't paint the back of all my pieces. But when I display them, they're usually up against a wall so you don't see them. If you're gonna have these on a tiered tray, like in the middle of a kitchen island or something like that, and you're going to be able to see all the way around, you can always just paint the backs a neutral color, you know, black, brown, whatever. That way it gives it a little bit more of a finished look. But that's it. This project is done. I hope you guys enjoyed working on this project, and make sure you're uploading your pictures to our Facebook group.